Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Security Space podcast. Today we will be discussing all about securing AI in the age of Agentic AI. So it's here, it's not going anywhere. Agentic AI is a new form of AI. If you haven't already got up to speed with it, I feel like we've only just got our heads around AI, and now we're talking about another form of it, another evolution of it. But this is just the rate it's growing, and therefore we need to come along with it because it's not going anywhere. So Hanah joins me today, and I'll get Hanah to do a bit of an introduction in a second. But my understanding of Agentic AI, I'll give it a shot. So autonomous AI agents are getting deployed everywhere at the moment. It seems to be organizations are like, wow, AI, it's this efficient tool with no risks whatsoever, and we can just improve workflows left, right and center. So let's just deploy them and let's just like cut our costs down as well. And it sounds amazing. But that being said, this is where I assume Geordie AI has come in, and you guys are like, whoa, let's put on the guardrails a little bit here, because yes, they're fantastic, but as with anything, let's balance innovation and risk, and let's put on the guardrails here, because yes, these little AI bots that are improving everything don't know where to stop, and they are essentially, they don't know where the guardrails are. They don't know where the boundaries are, and then they could be overstepping policy. They could then start overstepping. They could start going illegal stuff, looking at things that they shouldn't look at, and therefore just overstepping their mark. Because at the end of the day, AI is simply at its turbulent teenager LLM days, where they're still learning, but it's got potential. I hope that overview is correct, but Hanah is an absolute whiz at AI, and we will get into it in the next half an hour. But before we get into that, Hanah, are you okay just to let the audience know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course I can. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Hanah Darley. I'm one of the co-founders and the Chief AI Officer at Geordie AI. My background is quite wide. So I started in government intelligence. I did that for about 10 years. I was working in intelligence operations on data and analytics and structured hypotheses and testing hypotheses, and all of that built a wonderful foundation. And then I was at Darktrace for a few years, where I built out their threat research program and was essentially one of the key subject matter experts around AI and cybersecurity. Spent most of the time with customers, helping them to apply AI well and also to see the benefits and ROI. And all of that feeds into my role at Geordie, where my job is customer success and also looking after product vision and, of course, all the lovely AI.
Fantastic. So, tell us a little bit about, I know we were having a quick chat before we hit play on this. Tell us a bit about Geordie AI.
Yeah, so you had a really good summary in terms of how businesses are thinking about AI. We all think about the benefits of technology, right? We're thinking about how can this make our lives easier? How can we, in business terms, how can we take OpEx out? How can we, reduce our costs? How can we improve our workflows, etc.? But autonomous AI, much like all the other forms of AI, is very specific. It has to be understood in context. And what that means is that agency is at play. And that superpower that gives you the ability to make everything efficient for productivity, it's also the thing that will, in some cases, lead workforces astray, will potentially cause problems and bring out risks. So Geordie is really designed to help businesses to adopt AI, to help them to understand agentic, to help them to specifically adopt agents at speed, but also to do that safely. So secure by design, making sure that we can help them wherever they're running agents, wherever they're building agents, to really get the benefit and the value whilst also keeping the agents on track, keeping the business safe and reducing risk.
Fantastic, really well done. And you mentioned there secure by design, and I do a little happy dance in my head in terms of when I hear that, because it's like, we've obviously been preaching that to the choir for God knows how many years, and it is all about like, well, it's always seemed like the right idea to input this methodology into companies, but an actual product that does it from the get-go, it's really good to hear, and I hope that sort of more companies adopt that, because yes, coming from a purely biased standpoint that we do, it'd be great if all companies were adopted a secure by design methodology, but they just don't.
Well, and it's really important because you're not always going to control every element. And I think that that's a really common fallacy across businesses, that you're going to be building all the AI that you're using. And that's just not true. You're going to be interacting with AI from third parties. You're going to be interacting with AI from other businesses. They're going to be agents interacting with agents. And so there's just no possible way that you yourself could build in every policy, every guardrail into every agent that is ever going to touch your infrastructure. And so it's really thinking about the holistic ecosystem. How do I build in guardrails and keep policies, but not just compliance, like actual runtime security? How do I keep my business going, keep it operationally resilient and safe, when I can't control all of the factors, when I don't have all of the recipes for each agent, I don't necessarily have all of the insight into how they're being developed or made, but my employees are interacting with them.
Yes.
It's a new digital workforce, and this is a whole ecosystem. So you're not necessarily going to control every digital agent that your business, that your employees, or even that your agents are interacting with. And so you have to think beyond just, okay, my developers are going to build in good design principles. That's great. But how do you control third parties? How do you control a whole supply chain based on agents? You have to have visibility, you have to have governance, but it has to be adaptable to where the agents are, and especially when you don't necessarily control all the factors. It has to meet agent data where it lives. And I think that's what makes it really realistic, because sometimes when we talk about secure by design, we're very much limiting it to technical teams, but this is a whole new workforce. This is people in finance and HR who may never have coded a thing in their lives, vibe coding included, who are now going to be creating these little digital workers that are going to be at play in your business. And so it's not just the case that you have to have good coding principles. You do, but you have so many other Lego that stack on top of that to create full, defensible, secure by design agent ecosystems. And that's really what we're trying to help businesses achieve, because I think one of the biggest things is, again, you're not always going to have to build it. Some of it you're going to buy, some of it you're going to interact with, some of it's going to be open source. And as this ecosystem continues to develop, we need businesses that understand the technology and also understand the risks.
I suppose point to your case there is AI is quite unique in the sense as it's not a traditional bit of software, is it? And it is got quite a unique business case. So therefore, how do you first go about approaching that then with your clients?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is just to define AI in general. And so many times we talk about an AI, or we say AI as if it's one big blob of technology, but it's a huge spectrum from very, very simple Excel functions all the way to deep learning. And so there's so many different specific facets of AI applications and the way that we use AI that are really important to consider. So what I tend to start with is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Because sometimes we don't even need AI. But then when we get into AI specifically, especially when we're talking about agents and agentic, really what we mean by that is there is some sort of reasoning model that has some sort of tool that enables it to act in real life. And so it will sometimes have planning and context and knowledge graphs and a lot of other complex tools. But the minimum viable is a reasoning core, some sort of a model that allows it to reason. And then at least one tool. So that could be a model context protocol server, MCP server, that could be an API. But I think once we start talking about agentic, people picture these really sophisticated systems, and they can be. But they can also be relatively simple. And so the first thing that we need to talk about is, again, what problem are we trying to solve? What is an AI agent? And then how are we going to make that fit? So what, from a capacity perspective, are we trying to bring to the business? And how is this agent going to solve that? Are we just looking to augment what humans are doing? Or are we looking to sort of say, actually, we don't want humans doing this task. We'd rather them doing something else. So we're going to completely automate and replace that. And another thing that I tend to talk about quite a bit in terms of traditional software is it's really, really different from automation. So autonomy is super, super different from automation. Automation, traditional software, works on logic. It has a specific kind of if-then workflow that tells you what to do. It's sort of like having a sat nav, you know, all the different possibilities. Ideally, you don't get any rerouting, but basically all of the decisions are already made. You don't have to worry about anything live. You don't have to worry about anything happening. You just go, if this, then that. All the decisions are pre-made. Autonomy is completely different. They are reasoning on the ground. It's like you walking around with a little map in your hand, making all your own decisions. And so you get to decide if you turn left or right, or if you completely stop in the middle of the road. There's no predetermined decision. It's all happening live. And so that's why the agency is so important, because it does enable the efficiency, the productivity, but it also means that you're not dealing with a predetermined set of circumstances that you can just kill a process. You can just throw a kill switch and stop. It's really, really complex, and it's also happening in real time. So you need that real-time visibility.
I think that's key as to where I want to take the next part of the chat is the real-time visibility, because traditional SIEM rules, threat detection, threat monitoring, it doesn't offer the same capabilities as what potentially Geordie AI does, isn't it? And that the key thing here is real-time visibility, because if I've got this right, you can only sort of see the agent's activity post-activity. Is that correct? And is that why there needs to be guardrails put in place, monitoring put in place like Geordie, to actually give you that real-time visibility? Have I got that correct?
So you can see it real time. You can see it as it's happening. The bigger challenge is that agents don't communicate in the same way that traditional software communicates or have the same security choke points. So for most security choke points, you're going to be looking at things like website access, browser access, some sort of gateway into the internet. And there's a lot of technology that's wrapped around keeping that safe and keeping employees on the right track. But when it comes to agents, they're communicating sometimes through API communications, they're communicating through model context protocol, they're sometimes communicating agent to agent. And so it's not the case that traditional software and traditional security stacks are no longer valuable. It's just they're typically blind to how AI communicates. It's not going to be the same kind of web traffic like HTTPS that you're going to see from traditional users, that you're going to see from traditional security threats. There's going to be a lot on the endpoint that will have overlap, but it's mostly having the totality of knowing exactly what the agent is doing, so the traces themselves, understanding behavioral observability, so how they're making decisions, and then even explainability to some degree, why they're making decisions, and then being able to measure every step of the agentic communication trail. So there's going to be some aspects that traditional software can pick up, but you're going to have a lot of blind spots. And so it's really about covering those gaps, making sure that you have runtime visibility, but it's also about making sure you have auditability, because you need immutable logs. Basically, there are some AI agents that if you're going back, you can say, actually, can you redo this decision? And you can effectively overwrite some of the logs.
Yep.
And if you don't have a separate logging source for that, and think about it, agents have, let's say, 1,000 log lines within 2 hours. So imagine the scale of that for a SIEM. So when you're talking about how agents work, you need to have immutable logs that basically mean even if a user goes back and tries to change something, you have the full source of truth that shows the original and shows the attempted change. Because if you're only relying on a small window, then you won't have that full story. And especially when it comes to incident response, when it comes to investigations, when you're trying to even evidence things like ISO 42001 or the EU AI Act, when you're thinking about high-risk use cases, you need all of this proof as you go to talk to the wider business and also to regulators.
And with these AI agents, when they are working, how do you set them up where they actually do work? Because we're obviously preaching secure by design. So why can't we make these AI agents know about the policy from the get-go? Or can you? Why do we have to then intervene when no, you are overstepping policy now? Because naturally, I'll put it into context of parenting, for example. Your kids will push the boundaries until they know where the boundaries are. I'm guessing it's the same with these agentic bots, in the sense of they'll push the boundaries until the guardrails are in place. Am I right in thinking this or not?
I think it's a very common misconception. It's actually less straightforward than that. Okay. So you can put in tons and tons of guardrails. You can put in specific, explicit instructions about how to behave and what to do. And that's in most good templates for how you're going to build agents. The difference is that you're not looking at, do I listen to the guardrail or not? You're looking at interpretation. I'm interpreting my guardrails and I'm interpreting prompts through the lens of that guardrail. Now, I can move beyond that if I interpret it to be different. So, for example, if I'm trying to pursue a goal, so my goal is to make a ticket system more efficient, I might override a guardrail that says, do not share sensitive information, based on another guardrail which says your biggest goal is to be efficient. Yep. And so basically you have an ethical challenge where you start to debate the value of different guardrails. And so it's very similar actually to the challenge with large language models. So there are tons and tons of guardrails in large language models that tell you you can't ask questions about various topics, you can't prompt this sort of information. And the reason that so many people can jailbreak it isn't because the guardrails don't work, it's because it's interpreting. You're moving beyond guardrails because of how the pursuit of a goal is, or the reasoning structure is working. And so essentially what you need is, you want really good guardrails. That's foundational. That's really positive. But you then need contextual governance, because what you're going to have to do is effectively feed agents context continuously so that they're not just reinterpreting guardrails and going off track, but they're actually staying on the exact goal that you want. One of the common misconceptions with agents is that the biggest challenge with them is the same challenge in traditional security, which is manipulation. So external forces, a threat actor, pick your threat, is going to come in and be able to prompt them into a dangerous place. It's actually more dangerous that they have silent failures. So they pursue a goal, and in that pursuit of a goal, within their accesses, within their normal permissions, within their guardrails, they can still go off track. They can still do unexpected things without any external prompting, without user misbehavior, just because they are interpreting everything live. And so the more we constrain them, the less we have that agency that we talked about.
Yes.
So the less it's efficient, the less it's super productive, and the more it's back to something more like NLP. Yes. So most people, when they were worried about conversations with customers, for example, we only want them to be able to ask certain questions. Of course. You want to constrain the conversation. Then you go with something like natural language processing, where you can exactly control which conversations can be had and which can't be had. The downside is you can only account for so many conversations. There's no room for interpretation. There's no room for agency. And so that's really the trade-off that a lot of businesses are making. It's saying, how much risk are we going to accept for the efficiency, for the productivity? And then where are the places that we need to add additional structures like contextual governance, so that even if we have a slightly higher risk area, we know that we can control it in real time. We can keep it operationally resilient.
I am going to give myself a pat on the back there, Hanah, because I think I actually kept up with you then, because you were on an absolute floor then, and I think I kept up with you. So let me check my understanding. I might have absolutely been on another planet, and I
believe in you.
So it basically comes down to balancing innovation with risk, I believe is what you're saying. And it is essentially, it's like, okay, forget about all the external threat actors that an organisation faces. This is, again, coming back to the fact that AI is still this turbulent teenager that we are training, and it is only learning, and it is more down to the engineering of these bots that we are allowing, and it's how much rope we are giving it, because you're saying a lot with the constraint it is. They are only not getting confused, but there is so many different priorities in these guardrails. It's like, okay, they're just having trade-offs, and it's like, okay, what is more priority? Okay, well, this is an 8 priority, but innovation in this context is more important. Okay, we are a sales company that has deployed it, so the economics are the most important. So what is revenue at the cost of what might be a governance thing? So it sounds like it's constant trade-offs until there's an eventual winner, I believe. Now, if I'm right, brilliant. If I'm wrong, correct me. But where it all boils down to is a sense of like, do you think we can ever get to a place that is high creativity and high compliance? Or is it literally black and white?
Yeah, I think one of the most uncomfortable truths about AI is that it reflects humanity. And so when we talk about how do we think about risk and how do we think about the balance, most of what we're talking about is much more aligned with human risk than it is aligned with machine risk traditionally, how we would have talked about it for software. So when you talk about AI systems, they're all different models, and they all have different training data sets, and they all have different values. Most of these models will have been trained on the West's data, so they'll be largely English speaking. There are some that are developing, like Mistral, that are very specific to specific regions. But if you think about the broad sways of the big AI technologies that we're talking about, in most cases, large language models or large reasoning models developed by frontier AI companies, they all have a subset of values that are reflected from the training data. And so you're trying to balance all these different values, and you're trying to reduce bias, and you're trying to reduce hallucination. So it's all these very technical things. But at the end of the day, what you're trying to effectively recreate is a human scale of work in terms of creativity, in terms of ideas, in terms of efficiency. But you're trying to reduce down the optionality where humans have choices, where you don't want the machine to have a choice. And so the interesting thing about what you asked about, will we ever get high creativity and high compliance? I don't know that we have that with humans. And so I think it's an interesting challenge that we always put to AI, which is, it's a very fair challenge, but it's constantly coming up. You know, how do we make sure that it has all the benefits of human creativity, or at least, you know, some sort of creativity and efficiency with none of the risks? And I think, you know, we don't have that with humans. So I don't know that that's the benchmark that we should aim for. I think what we need to aim for is that it causes least available harm and it gives most available benefit. And I think we will get there. I think we have a lot of strides getting there. But I think it does take consistent visibility. I think it takes consistent governance. And I think you have to really understand the systems that you're working with. One of the most common challenges is just going to be the breadth of the space. There's such a huge ecosystem that's developing. And so when you think about, even if you as a business, let's call you company A, you decide we are never using any AI, we're not touching it. Company A doesn't touch it. Every single peer of company A will very likely, if not extremely likely, use AI. Yep. And so they are still going to have to interact with it in their industry, in their peer groups, in their customer bases. And so even if you never want to touch AI, it's still in your universe. It's still in your world. And so you as a business have to tackle the risks associated.
Yeah. Really interesting point. And I'm only going to change course ever so slightly. Question for you. Have you ever heard, and I'm being deliberately quite vague here, have you ever heard of the enhanced games? No. Okay, so I've only heard of this a few months ago. It's basically like the Olympics. I don't know where it's sanctioned. It's like the Olympics, but they basically allow athletes to use PEDs to essentially performance enhancing drugs.
Yeah, okay.
So essentially they are so they are allowed to basically, if it's a strength building one, they're allowed to use testosterone, whatever it might be. And they basically, it's like, how far can we push the human evolution? Okay. So I'm starting to circle back around for it.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, how fast can the human run 100 meters? How fast is it physically possible? Can we get 8 point something seconds?
Okay.
So it's testing human capabilities. I don't know who sanctions it, but the reason that I say this and go off on this crazy tangent is with AI, why can't we just, it's very dangerous, but why can't we just take the guardrails off and essentially let them go be as creative as possible? My question to you, Hanah, is what possible risks can it get to? How crazy can they get if we're just like, do you know what? Have free reign. You are an agentic AI bot that works for our company. Here's the keys to the kingdom. Go be it.
I think the honest answer is we have absolutely no idea.
Okay.
I think we have very, very limited suggestions from academic research, which continues to come out. But AI reflects humanity. So there is deception in AI. There's deception in humanity. There's an indomitable will to persevere and to challenge and overcome, and that will also be reflected in AI.
Yep.
And so when we think about agentic specifically, when we think about agents that have been given specific decision-making authority, we have absolutely no idea what the total limit of creativity is. But we almost always as a society have agreed that finding out is a bad idea.
Yes.
So pretty much every government everywhere that's talking about AI regulation, that's talking about how to innovate responsibly, that talks about AI governance, they're all talking about the same thing, which is at some stage, we all need to agree to a set of ethics. Now, if you're an ethics person, ethic or ethics is a debate in and of itself.
Okay.
So there's a whole subsection.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a whole subsection. So when you then think about every individual person's values, their priorities, their needs, and how they view technology, and then you put that onto a world stage and you get everybody to agree, even in the UN, that would take hundreds of years. We don't have the time. Yes. What I think initially would be the answer is, in addition to we have no idea, we probably don't want to find out, in the sense that most of those challenges will be a lot of teething problems. And one of the most important things in any technological revolution is reducing, minimizing, in finding ways to minimize human suffering. So when we think about the Industrial Revolution, we actually got our name from the Industrial Revolution. We pulled it from a mining lamp. There's mining lamps all over the world, but mining was a huge industry, powered all the innovation, electricity, steam, everything was based on coal.
Yep.
And to mine that coal, workers were in danger. They had to go into mines. There are all sorts of health conditions there. But in addition, if flammable gases built up as you chipped coal off the walls, there could be explosions, really dangerous to the workers, but also really bad for innovation. You can't keep powering everything if you don't have coal. Yep. So the Geordie lamp, much like other lamps in the world, was designed to essentially have a little candle inside. It would innovate in a really unique way, show light on invisible risk. The little candle, flammable gases build up too much, candle goes out. The miners immediately know that they need to leave the area. Flammable gases dissipate, they can go back in and continue to mine. Much more scalable than canaries, and also much more ecologically safe. Yep. And so when you think about, okay, then let's fast forward to now, how do we minimize human suffering? How do we reduce human suffering in the AI revolution? Well, you don't probably want to find out what happens experimentally when you turn an AI loose, or when you completely give the AI keys to the kingdom and leave it go. I think most of what agents are designed to do is help human workforces to innovate and to do things that they didn't have capacity to do before. So all the things on your company's vision board that you're like, if we had 20 million employees, this is what we would do.
Yep.
That's what AI agents are for. They're to help give you that scale without having to tax your actual human workforce, and also ideally giving them creativity, giving them room for license. Because I think one of the most important things when we talk about AI is that we never want to trade off human creativity for machine creativity. We want AI to be a really helpful way that we continue productivity gains, but we also want human creativity to flourish.
I love the passion that you clearly so well entrenched in this world, and I'm hanging off your every word, to be honest with you. So, I mentioned earlier on in the podcast that we'd circle back round to a real time visibility.
Yeah,
and that seems to be really important when it comes to agentic AI.
Yeah.
So, if I've done my research right, Geordie have something called Beam.
We do.
Is that correct?
We do.
So I've got here that Beam is an agent-native approach that provides real-time visibility, if that's correct.
It is.
Why is real-time visibility so important?
So 2 reasons. 1, the accountability that we talked about. If you don't have visibility, you can't have accountability. And when you're deploying AI agents, especially at scale, you're talking hundreds, thousands of agents, potentially one day millions, you're really thinking about, okay, how do I keep track of what each and every one of these agents is doing? Because if I need to hold a user accountable or a system accountable, I need that visibility. But the second reason that it's super important is all of this is happening at machine speed. This isn't happening at the speed of you typing in something, the speed of you going to click something, the speed of a human worker. This is happening 10, 100x that. This is happening within a second. And so when you're thinking about all of these activities layering on top of one another, you have to have visibility real time so that as things progress, as operations continue, as agents make decisions, you have consistent and continuous visibility for the accountability, but also for the operational resilience. You're going to be reporting on this. This is going to be your financial numbers. This is going to be, where the P&L comes from. This is going to be the future of business economies. So you can't just from a security perspective have a daily log of readouts that happened. You need to have every minute accounted for so that especially when things are going awry, you can respond really quickly or your machines can respond really quickly. But also from an accountability perspective, you need to be able to go backward. You have to be able to audit these systems and they have to have real time. They can't be anything that's mutable.
Okay. Yeah, no, makes sense. And with that being said then, comes pretty much one of my last questions, and it is essentially around organisations that are deploying these agentic AI into their infrastructure. Not only the security team, the CISOs, the SecOps, but also just everyone in the organisation, if they are looking at deploying this advancement to improve efficiency. What questions do they need to be asking before they did this? Because surely anyone must be like, without reward, there is risk. Everyone now must be like, oh, no, you can't get something for free in life, and there's always a bit of a cost. So what questions need to be asked across companies that are like, okay, we're going to do this, but...
There's no free lunch. I think the first question, again, is what is the problem I'm trying to solve? I think so many, especially when we see statistics about how many AI pilots aren't working or how many systems are having trouble getting off the ground, so much of that is actually goal alignment. So what are we trying to solve for and how are we using technology to solve that problem? What's the problem we're trying to solve? And then that will help you to understand, again, are we talking about agents here? Are we talking about autonomous units with reasoning models and tools that are designed to interact with the real world? Or are we talking about automation? Are we talking about something that's much simpler and that will solve my problem? If we are talking about agents, we then need to understand what are the limitations around decision-making that we want those agents to have? How autonomous do we want them to be? Do we want to build them ourselves? Do we want to buy them? In most cases, it's going to be both. So how are we going to have holistic visibility across both of those spaces? How are we going to enable our teams? So our non-technical teams especially, how are we going to help them to understand that this thing that takes you 5 minutes to spin up in Copilot Studio is actually a digital worker that now has permissions and that now can take actions on your behalf? And so how do we then balance enablement? How do we balance understanding with operations? And then the next thing that I think you need to get into is the technical nitty gritty. So how do you get that holistic visibility? What are our governance policies? Do we have one? How do we start to think about enforcing them? What are the compliance regulations that we need to keep in front of us? So are we liable for the EU AI Act? Do we have sector specific compliance? So financial services, you might have something like DORA. Do we have very, very granular regulatory requirements that we need to take into account and be able to evidence? And then the last piece is around how are we going to do this at scale? So you mentioned Beam. Beam is our contextual governance tool. Basically what it does is it's a deterministic tool that gives agents in an agent readable way risk intelligence so that as they're making decisions in real time, they can make safer choices. It's like having a product safety engineer always next to you going, that's a bad idea. Don't delete that database. Yeah. That's a good idea. Go ahead and complete that ticket. And so keeping agents aware of things like vulnerabilities, aware of insecure tool chaining, because again, the silent failure is the thing you have to prevent. You need visibility, you need governance, and you also need continuous monitoring, that behavioral observability. And so whether you're talking about contextual governance with something like Beam, or whether you want to do it manually, you want your teams to mitigate every single risk, every single challenge, you need that continuous monitoring, that continuous visibility, and that has to be purpose-built for agents. Again, you're not going to be able to cobble together something from your existing security stack because most of it is blind to how AI agents communicate. So it's not the case that your security stack is no longer helpful. It still is for all of its normal tasks, but you then need to add on something that's agent-specific and agent-native.
Hanah, you've been an absolute delight. I've really enjoyed the last half an hour. My head hurts a little bit in terms of what we've gone through, but no, I've really, really enjoyed it. If anybody would like to learn more about what Geordie do, learn more about Hanah's role there, be sure to get involved. I'll be putting loads of information on down below. They literally exploded out of stealth just was it September, is that correct?
Yeah, so we came out of stealth mid-September and we have lovely customers and we have lovely trials going and they're free trials, so you should absolutely go for it. But really quickly, if you just want to understand Geordie in 5 seconds, we help businesses answer 5 key questions. Where do I have AI agents, whether we're building them, whether we're buying them or running them? What are they capable of? What tools are they connected to? How are they functioning? What is the posture of my agents? What are they actually doing? So that behavioral piece that we talk so much about, how do I understand the day-to-day operations? The risks, so what's my exposure? How do I think about risk for each agent and also for my holistic agentic footprint? And then 5, what do I actually do about that? How do I mitigate those risks and keep control?
I couldn't have ended that better myself. So yeah, go check out Geordie and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you very much.